I wanted to do that. What else did I wanted to do? I wanted to I mean, it's honestly, it's not going to be like an exciting stream. It's going to be a pretty heavy stream because of the amount of like violence that unfortunately our country, as in my country, the United States, is implementing. It's really disturbing and frustrating, and I fucking hate it. What happened to my thing? Did I? There we go. There we go. I was like, there's something missing. So yeah, the plan is actually, I think what I want to do today at this moment is I want to talk about the SAVE Act because I'm seeing a little too much or too many people that are like, the SAVE Act is not that serious. I don't understand why people are making it such a big deal. This is the reason why we don't have DHS. I mean, this is why TSA is so long, is because people are so stupid, all this bullshit. Well, I am here to inform you as to what the SAVE Act actually is and why it's pretty fucking significant. The SAVE Act doesn't just do one thing. It's not just for IDs. It's not just for showing your ID. That's always been a big thing. But I think people don't understand that it's incredibly hard to get your ID. Oh my God, I'm so sorry. It's incredibly hard to get your ID. I mean, and it's expensive. I just got my new license and that cost $65. Not everyone has $65. So there's that. Also, on top of that, you had to bring a lot of paperwork. You had to bring your social security card. You had to bring your license. You had to bring a utility bill. You had to bring all of this stuff. And I know it sounds crazy, but not everyone has their birth certificate and social security card. Whether it was they moved and they lost it, or they didn't have their social security card given to them. Maybe they were adopted and then stopped talking to parents. Like, there's so many different situations where people don't have those two documents. And yet you need those two documents to get your license, which is very significant. So there's that. Number 2, name changes. This one is probably the biggest, most significant one, specifically for married people, specifically married women, where they change their last name. And you need your birth certificate and your social security card to match your last name. And that is not possible. Your birth certificate will never match your new name because you were not born. You were a baby. Like, hello, you have your maiden name. And then you would have to get a completely new social security card. Some people decide to do that right away. Some people don't. Either way, that's a pain in the fucking ass. And also, you have to pay for every single one of these documents if you've lost them. So that's additional payments on top of paying for your license. So that's 3 different types of payments. And it's just really concerning. So there's a clip that is recently gone kind of viral of a Republican, his name is Chip Roy, talking about the SAVE Act. And then we'll see what other people, aka the dictator of the year, Trump, what he has to say about the SAVE Act. Oh, and how could I forget? They want to get rid of mail-in voting, which is kind of hypocritical considering that it just came out today in a report that Trump used mail-in voting to literally vote for someone in Florida. We'll get to that also. So Chip Roy is a Republican, and this was footage was secretly recorded from a Zoom meeting from February last year featuring the Election Integrity Network, an organization founded by Cleta Mitchell, a 2020 Trump attorney who played a central role in efforts to overturn his loss, is a stunning admission as Roy publicly claims that the bill isn't a barrier to women while admitting in private the exact hurdles women face. So let's see what this motherfucker has to say.
The SAVE Act is obviously critically important. The problem we have is we've got some folks out there that are trying to stir the pot on this, allegation that it somehow is a barrier for married women to be able to vote because they've, got to deal with getting IDs with name changes and all those things. Although, frankly, I'm trying not to elevate the issue too much. My chief of staff had to go get a new ID in Virginia. Virginia's adopted the Real ID system. So she had to go through a bunch of hoops. She's going to have to go back to the DMV twice because they want the paperwork for it. That's just part of the issue with how we try to set up the ability to identify people. But there's no barriers at all to married women being able to vote. The SAVE Act is obviously critically important. The problem we have...
So he just admitted what I just said about your experience. Now, I didn't have my name changes. Like, my last name's the same. I'm not married. And so I didn't have that experience. But either way, I still had to go to the AAA twice because I didn't bring my social security card. I only brought my birth certificate, and they wanted both. Like, they don't make getting IDs easy. They make it fucking hard. And there's a reason for that. It's called voter suppression. With forcing people to have IDs, you are basically saying, hey, you need to show proof. But at the same time, we're going to make it 70 times harder. What the fuck is happening? Okay, that keeps going off and it's freaking me out. But either way, it's very frustrating that this is something that has been said and the Republicans are like, that's not true. That's not true. So here is the dictator himself talking about the SAVE Act in a few different clips.
They're doing everything possible because they know if we get this, they'll
Hi, Lyndon.
probably won't win an election for 50 years, okay? And maybe longer. And they're going to fight like hell. But boy, do they get killed. Because even the Democrats, you saw the numbers today, Democrats voted 86% that this stuff should be passed. The Democrats. With Republicans, you're at 98%. But Democrats are at 86%, except for the people that run the Democrat Party, because they want to try and win elections illegally. It's the only reason you vote against voter ID is because you want to cheat. There's no other reason. They come up with reasons. They say, it's racist. That's their number one, racist. Then you have to explain it, and they're just sitting there mumbling. They can't explain it. They're doing everything possible.
So that's one. Here is another time he talked about the SAVE Act.
So I'm tying Homeland Security into voter identification with picture and proof of citizenship in order to vote. And those two items are the most important thing having to do with Homeland Security. So it should be part of the Homeland Security bill. And I'm requesting...
This is his new thing now. This is what he's trying to change.
That the Republican senators do that immediately. You don't have to take a fast vote. Don't worry about Easter going home. In fact, make this one for Jesus, okay? Make this one for Jesus. That's what I tell them. It'd be a damn good thing. The most important part of Homeland Security is voter ID and proof of citizenship. Nobody can vote on Homeland Security without voter ID or proof of citizenship. And you can't have Homeland Security without voter ID or proof of citizenship. So we're tying them together. So I'm tying Homeland Security into voter identification.
I just... Very frustrating, very frustrating. This is what the Republicans have been saying about the SAVE Act.
You have to show a photo ID to board a plane, to buy a beer. Why not to vote? You have to show a photo ID.
They make it sound like it's so fucking easy. I don't see any women here. No, all I see is men that don't change their last names. This is what another Republican said about the SAVE Act. Well, this is him blaming, no, this is for something else. Sorry. But here Trump said, cast a ballot in an upcoming Florida special election, according to Palm Beach County records, as he publicly condemns the voting method as fraudulent. That's another part of the SAVE Act, is that he wants to stop mail-in voting, even though mail-in voting, there's nothing wrong with mail-in voting. It helps with people who are disabled, people who live overseas for the time being, for soldiers who want to still vote, for people who can't go during election day because it's not a federal holiday. So most people don't have it off, which is a very big issue. There's so many issues with the fact that he wants to get rid of mail-in voting, because the thing is, mail-in voting is leans more towards Democrats. Democrats mainly do mail-in voting. Meanwhile, Republicans are the ones that do during the day, same day election. The problem is he's trying to get mail-in voting to not happen, because he's saying, well, if you can't count it up by election day, then it shouldn't count. That's not true, but that's what he wants. So the SAVE Act is just so fucking detrimental. It is terrifying, and I feel like not enough people know about it or truly understand the significance of the SAVE Act. You are crying. It's okay, Linton. It's okay. So here is some clips on people who are discussing the SAVE Act. This specifically is about Alyssa Slotkin and why the SAVE Act is so dangerous. Now, let's be very clear. I don't like the CIA lady. I don't trust her. But one thing I think is significant, though, is she's being very clear on the significance of the SAVE Act. And I mean, she used to be CIA. I mean, hello.
Mr. President.
To recognize the senator from Michigan.
Thank you, Mr. President. I rise today against the so-called Save America Act. Mr. President, I believe that our elections are the foundation of our democracy. Most Americans do. It's how we protect our country from tyranny and dictatorship. It's how we remain the greatest country in the world. But the SAVE Act does not safeguard our elections. It does the opposite. My Republican colleagues like to repeat over and over that this is about voter ID at the polls, that showing ID at the polls is something that we have to do, and that's what this bill is about. That already happens. Most Americans, 99.999% of Americans, do what everyone else does. They walk into the polls on Election Day. They bring their ID. The volunteers and the clerks check your ID, and they see you check it to the voting rolls, and they say, come on in and go ahead and vote. That already happens across the country, and certainly.
And also, like, you have to register to vote prior. Some places have same day voting rule, which in my opinion, I think should be mandatory. Every place should have same day voting. But a lot of places don't. You have to register in advance to vote, aka register as a Democrat or Republican or independent. That way they have that your information already, and that's where they look through the voting roll.
The state of Michigan. This bill is not about voter ID, which hopefully all Americans are in agreement about. It's about making it harder to vote so that more Americans are excluded from voting. It requires that Americans have proof of citizenship in order to vote. So just by example, I brought my Michigan license, okay? Michigan license, my official, it's the official safe version. There is no proof of citizenship. It says my address, it says my eye color, it says all these things, but it does not have my citizenship. It's just not on the license. And for most of Americans, it's not on the license. So how would I prove my citizenship? Well, I can do it, I guess, in two ways. You can either bring a passport with you, or you can bring an original birth certificate in the name you want to vote with. Passport. 60% of Michiganders have no passport. They've never applied for one.
I don't currently have a passport. Mine expired, and it's like hundreds of dollars to get your passport. Like, it's not fucking cheap.
They don't need one. They're not interested in one. And if you want to get a passport, it's nearly $200. So now we're charging a fee for people to do what I hope most people believe is a God-given right as an American, to vote. And then if not, you've got to have an original copy of your birth certificate in the name you want to vote in. Well, as you can imagine, for millions and millions of women who took their married name, took their husband's name, their birth certificate doesn't show the name they plan to vote with. So it puts an unbelievable onerous requirement on those married women.
Isn't it a fairly small minority of people in the US with a passport, at least relative to other countries? I'm not sure. So let me look. I mean, I can imagine so, especially like compared to Europe. But I'm not sure, but I'll look it up while we're listening.
This bill also truly constrains mail-in voting. This is going to hurt senior citizens, military, folks in nursing homes, college students who don't live at home. This is intended simply to make it harder to vote. And I want to double tap this because Michiganders weighed in on the ballot on this very issue. In 2018, Michiganders voted in a law that said that anyone...
So according to Google, 170 million people have their passports that was in 2026. Between 45% and 50% of Americans hold a valid passport. So half, which is not, I mean, what about the other 50% who have every right to vote?
Could vote absentee for any reason, and it passed with 67% of the vote. And I'll remind you that Donald Trump has won my state twice. In the years since, voter participation has gone up. I would hope that that would be seen as a good thing. Mail-in voting is safe, it's secure, it's the law in Michigan, and undoing it is simply to satisfy President Trump's very specific goals of making sure, quote, only the right people vote. As a nation, we've made a lot of strides in the past 50 years in getting more people to vote. The SAVE Act undoes that, and it represents a significant change. It gives power.
What happened?
Administration is to be done by the states. And in the commentary on it, they said that was because we never want a president and his supporters to have overwhelming power over the organs of democracy, over the foundation of our elections. So they give that administrative power to the states. Now, President Trump and my colleagues across the aisle have railed against federal involvement in our elections.
So, like, what she's saying is that because there's not a federal ID that everyone must have, that's why we separate it and put it to the states. And she's like, y'all, the Republicans don't want the federal government to be involved in your voting rights, which in my opinion, I agree. I don't think they should. Look at what's happening. Like, you know.
They've signed amicus briefs and talked about overreach by the federal government in our elections when they thought it was going to hurt them. Now they've done a complete 180. If you want to understand where my colleagues really stand on this issue, just look at their comments and President Trump's his statement of administration policy when the House in 2019 passed the John Lewis Voting Rights Act. Literally, in many ways, a codification of the Voting Rights Act of the late 60s. Many of my colleagues were happy to criticize the federal government telling states how to run their elections. They gave speeches about it, they went on the media about it, and talked all about democratic overreach. But this is how you know that they've lost the plot, because when it's their team that's in power, when it's their team that's in the White House, when it's their team that's giving them, oh, here we are, Donald Trump says in the State of the Union that if my team doesn't win in November.
Next, they'll bring back literacy tests and poll taxes. Honestly, would not be fucking surprised. I mean, I think they wouldn't bring literacy tests because I think Republicans know that most of their majority will not pass it. I really don't think they believe that. Hi, Kaushal. What a fun name.
The elections are rigged, and he only wants, quote, the right people voting. So here we have this bill that they don't have the votes for, and they are talking about what they're going to do to help, quote, save America. Now, in Michigan, just to put the issue in perspective, because my colleagues like facts, we have about 6 million voters out of 10 million in our state. In 2024, in an election won by Donald Trump, wasn't contested by anyone on the other side of the aisle, 15 individual voters were flagged as potentially being non-citizens. 15 out of 6 million. Now, even one non-citizen voting is a bad thing, and they should be held accountable, and they were.
Okay, this is the CIA part of her.
The highest and utmost of the law in Michigan, including spending some time in jail for one guy. But 15 out of 6 million is 0.00025%. These 15 were flagged and even confirmed quickly as non-citizens. This bill is like using a bazooka to go after a housefly. It's not smart, and in the process, it makes it harder for millions of Americans, particularly women, to vote in these elections.
And trans people. I want to also include trans people.
And make no mistake, that is the point. We are only debating this bill because of one fact. Donald Trump doesn't like to lose elections, and his team wants to shield him from another embarrassing loss this coming fall. That's it. He's shown us from the beginning how he feels about fraud. 7 months before the 2020 election, he got up in front of the United States and said, if I don't win in 2020, the election is rigged. And you know, people in this body wrote strongly worded letters. They poo-pooed it. They said there's no way an American president will actually try and refute the results of a Democratic election, where clerks, Democrat and Republican across the country are just doing their job. Fast forward to January 6th, and people in this body are hightailing it off this floor, barricading themselves in their office, as I did on the House side, looking for a weapon to protect themselves as a mob instigated by the president crashed into this very floor.
Maybe not a strict literacy test, but I could definitely see a test on American life/culture that heavily favors certain contingents of people they'd prefer to vote. Yeah, I can see that too. I can definitely see that. I mean, NPR 7, where it talks about Christian values. I can see them doing something like that.
Sounds familiar to me. In the State of the Union, just a month ago, the president said, quote, the only way that Democrats can get elected is if they cheat. Is that what my colleagues on the other side of the aisle believe? Do you believe that the only way that I'm here is because I cheated? Donald Trump won on the top of my ballot. Did I cheat to get here? Did he win his last election or no? Passing the SAVE Act will, quote, guarantee the midterms for Republicans. Another thing he said. We're only here because you're doing his bidding and trying to pass a bill that he says will help him guarantee the elections. He says, quote, we'll never lose a race. For 50 years, if this passes, we'll never lose a race. Does that sound like someone who actually gives a flying fig about actual democracy?
Similar to the, quote, life in the UK test that migrants must take in the UK for citizenship, where it's just full of obscure history that not even the average Brit would know. We have that. I don't know if it's called life in the UK, but we have that for citizens, the citizens test. Say that 10 times fast. The citizens test, which honestly, not even like a 7th grader can pass because we don't teach it. And yet we're supposed to have people who English may be their second language, people who are coming here as refugees. We expect them to take it, but American citizens, people who were born here, they probably have no fucking clue how to pass that test. So, yep.
Or does that sound like someone who's asking his boys to rig elections for him in November? Now, I was polite the last time the President of the United States did this. In 2020, I was one of those people who said, you know what, the President can't really mean this. Let's send letters. Let's talk about it politely on camera. I spoke up at hearings. We asked the military what they were going to do if the President tried to steal the election. Frankly, I and a lot of us on this floor had a failure of imagination for what this president would do. But I am not going to make that mistake again. Mr. President, I will close with this. The President of the United States has laid out what he believes for everyone to see. We have to believe the words he is telling us. That same president is now grinding the Senate to a halt by trying to pass a bill that doesn't do a single thing for your pocketbook, your house, your kids, your health care, or anything else he ran on. He's busy taking weeks at a time on this floor of time we could otherwise be working in a bipartisan manner to pass things that would help people with their cost of living. But he wants to do this because he wants to make sure he's not embarrassed in the fall. And all those promises he said he was going to fulfill, that he's left open, he doesn't want the chickens to come home to roost for him in November. So as Michiganders are waiting in line at the gas pumps right now, as the price of gas jumps 60 cents per day in some cases, as middle-class Americans are unable to buy a home, we're talking about making it harder for women and old people and the military to vote. Instead of addressing the fundamental issues of Americans, we are doing the bidding of the President of the United States because he told us all that if he doesn't win, it's rigged, so we better cover down for him. Mr. President, this is not what we should be spending our time on. Focus on the issues that the American public is calling all of us, asking us to address. It's not what we need, and I yield back my time.
So I think she did a really good job, honestly, of just being very concise about the detriments of the fucking SAVE Act. Like, it's so frustrating how many people really believe what the Republicans are saying, even though everything the Republicans say is a fucking lie. And I don't know how many times I have to say it. But it's significant that we continue to bring awareness to the SAVE Act, because I really do not think people understand that Trump is doing everything possible to get this to pass. And that is why the TSA is shut. They're not getting paid. That's why TSA people are quitting or calling out sick, because they're not getting paid. Why the fuck should they go? That's why ICE is now in the airports. They are doing this to intimidate you. They're doing this because they want the SAVE Act to pass, even though they secretly know that it is detrimental. As a former CIA agent or whatever, she does not give one single fuck about democracy. She just wants to maintain the illusion so they can keep being bipartisan on keeping the imperial machine going. I have a lot of qualms with Alyssa Slotkin. I want to make that she's voted more with Republicans specifically to for the nominees than I would ever agree with. But I think that her breakdown was really helpful. But yeah, no, I have thoughts on Alyssa Slotkin, that's for sure. But yeah, there's also this video that I saw that I kind of wanted to see what else it had. It's by CNBC, and it talks about the SAVE Act. This was made a month ago. This was before Trump included trans people. Like he wants to not have trans people in sports. He's also added that he doesn't want mutilation for kids who are trans, which doesn't fucking happen. So he's added those. So they might not mention that in this video. Not that she shouldn't fight against this, but I definitely don't think her motivations are moral. Yeah, no, I think that's fair. I think that's a fair observation.
Under the Save America Act, individuals will be required to provide that proof of citizenship.
Who's this? Is that Chip Roy, the man that said that his chief of staff is going to have such a fucking hard time because she has to go to the DMV twice? That's this motherfucker.
In order to register, and on election day, required to demonstrate voter identification.
The purpose of the SAFE Act is to ban non-citizens from voting in federal elections and also to implement some kind of voter ID law where you would have to show your driver's license when you go to cast a ballot. My name is Justin Papp. I cover politics for CNBC. So the initial version of the SAVE Act that Chip Roy introduced and Mike Lee introduced in the Senate in late January would have required some form of ID at the ballot box that proved you were an American citizen, so something like a passport, for instance. There's an amended version of the SAVE Act that was introduced over the weekend that pares that back a little bit. Some form of photo ID would still be required at the polls to vote, but the list of acceptable forms of ID is longer and could include things like state-issued IDs. Importantly, college IDs are still prohibited under this amended version, which is a concern that many Democrats have, that Republicans are specifically targeting demographic groups, including young people, that tend to vote for Democrats.
While the specific policies may have changed since the days of the Jim Crow South, the goal of the SAVE Act is the same: disenfranchising American citizens and making it harder for eligible people to vote.
More than 21 million Americans don't have ready access to documents proving that they're American citizens, and something like more than 2 million people don't have a valid form of government-issued ID. As things like voter ID have become more of a concern, particularly among Republicans, some states, mostly in the South, like North Carolina and Mississippi, have implemented voter ID laws. Non-citizens are not allowed to vote in federal elections, but there are certain territories like Washington, D.C. that allow them to vote. Elections are mostly state-run. States can decide their own laws around how they carry out elections, but constitutionally, Congress does have a role in legislating around how elections are carried out.
You know, if you think about it, a state is an agent for the federal government in elections. I don't know why the federal government doesn't do them anyway.
Trump just keeps banging this drum about the prospect of non-citizens voting, and it's sort of reached a fever pitch in the past several weeks. He's raised concerns about the security of elections and about the prospect of non-citizens voting in elections. It can happen, it does happen occasionally, but it is already illegal. And there are strict penalties for anybody who tries to vote if they're a non-citizen. Fundamentally, most Democrats do not agree with the concept of voter ID, and so it's got a very difficult path to get to President Trump's desk. The Republican majority in the Senate is slim. More than a handful of Democrats would have to join their Republican colleagues and support the bill to get it over the 60-vote filibuster threshold. My sense is they're trying to make this proposal more palatable to Democrats. There's been this massive pressure campaign from the GOP, from influencers, from people like Elon Musk, in addition to Trump himself. They continue to point to public polling, which shows that the vast majority of Americans are in support of at least the concept of voter ID, but Democrats and voting rights groups say the devil is in the details. It's about how those voting rights laws are written and who they will potentially disenfranchise.
Clear and concise. No notes. The only document I've ever had to, going to the DMV for your documentation even once is a hurdle in itself. I've never had to go anywhere to obtain any of the ID I hold. All of my passports and licenses have been online. It is very possible they just actively choose to make this as difficult as possible. The only document I've ever had to travel for is accompanying my friend to London for his Japanese visa because you have to go to the embassy. Yeah, they don't make it easy. They do not make it easy. They make it so hard. Earlier, I was talking about how I just had my new license and I had to go there twice because I didn't have my social security card but I had everything else. And they were like, no, you need your birth certificate and your social security card. They don't make it easy. They do not make it easy. They make it so fucking hard. And also, it's so expensive. Like, to get my license, it was $65. Like, that's a lot of money. And so if you are working class, if you're someone who's poor, $65 cannot be spared. And some people may think, well, I mean, they have my information. I already applied online. Like, I live here. I'm a citizen. Like, I mean, come on. It doesn't make sense how they treat it. And isn't the line long as fuck at all times from what I've gathered from TV over the years? Now they do it a little differently. Like, I went to AAA. It's like a different place. And you have to do appointments, but the appointments was for 3 weeks later. So like, you can't do instantly. Like, walk-ins are not a thing anymore. You have to do appointments, and it's usually 3 to 4 weeks. It's kind of insane. So yeah, that's the SAVE Act that I just really wanted to touch upon. The next thing I wanted to